I guess I would say I think it's international in financial support, using a lot of U.S. military technology within deeply clandestine special access programs, what we might call unacknowledged special access programs, very deep black budget. My feeling, my sense is that we're talking about multiple groups within this very advanced clandestine community, that they don't all share with each other. They might compete actively with each other. It's the impression that I get, at least from some research and sources that I've been trying to work in this. And in terms of who they are, well, I would look to I think very elite financial interests are probably paramount in this. Now, who the names are, I don't know yet.
We're all trying to find
Right,
them.
exactly.
Yeah.
But in terms of the technologies that I think that are available to this clandestine world, I think they're quite substantial. Keep in mind, in the official history of our world, organizations within like the NSA and other U.S. military have been vastly far ahead of the rest of the world in computing technology for years. I had a conversation with an NSA scientist who said back in the mid-'60s their computers ran at a clock speed of about 650 megahertz. Now, that's not fast today, but that wasn't reached by the rest of the world till around the year 2000, so about 35 years. Not something as basic as NSA computing technology, but what if you've got a lead in studying something even more exotic than what they might have? Maybe acquired ET tech, which I think is very likely. Well, in that case, the sky's the limit. And, they might have made certain breakthroughs in understanding things that might make them some money, new developments in integrated circuits and the like. But if they make a breakthrough that goes beyond that, they might not be able to share, whether in revolutionary energy, for example. If that's the case, this is not something that would be shared with the world, but it is something that they would continue to exploit, that would give them power beyond imagining, capabilities beyond imagining, the ability literally to go off this planet if they wanted to.
Do you think there's a primary, motivation for them for doing this? If there's like the one thing, the reason why they would do this, what would that be?
My suspicion is that one of the primary reasons is that they're scrambling to try to deal with the presence of these other beings that are observing us, that are probably very actively fascinated by us and engaged in dealing with us. It could very well be that we are quarantined on this world. When you look at the history of the Apollo missions and all of the subsequent non-exploration of space, really, it makes one wonder. There's certainly no shortage of leaks that have come from that world that deal with, that describe bases supposedly on the far side of the moon. Some of these from very credible individuals. Well, what if that's the case? So that there would be a presence of very advanced others that are here, that our clandestine world might feel that they have to try to deal with in some way. And so part of it could be a secret Cold War. That could be part of it. The other part of it would simply be, as every war has winners and losers, they would want to be financial winners. So they would want to use and exploit the technology for the benefit within this civilization, that they would continue to run things the way they want to run them.
Disclosure, that idea, do you think we'll ever get to that point? Official from government?
Absolutely, I do. They'll have to be dragged kicking and screaming to do it. They're never going to do it voluntarily. There's nothing to gain from their point of view, but they're going to have to. And the reason is because of us right now. You're doing an interview with me with technology that even 10 years ago really was not practical. We as a society are the great dynamic. We're the great change agent in this equation. Not these other beings and not the secret keepers, but us. And we're developing capabilities that are going to force this issue. That's the thing. And I don't know if it'll be next year, I don't know if it'll be 10 years from now, maybe 20, but I don't think more than that, in which something's going to happen that's going to force this issue. And when that happens, that's when the whole battle begins, doesn't end. See, disclosure is not the end of anything. It's the beginning of everything. It's the beginning of the real fight for truth. Because Because it's very likely that when we get an acknowledgement that this is real, we may not get a lot more. We may not get, a little gray alien being alongside the president of the U.S. at some podium. That may not happen. And so if it doesn't, there's going to be argument, debate, very, very intense debate over what we're dealing with. Political parties are going to be transformed. It's going to be a raucous melee that will probably take generations for us to settle everything out and decide what we're actually dealing with. I have, yeah. I've seen, I think, on 2 occasions what I would call a UFO. I don't really talk about it a lot, but both of them were odd. Not spectacular, but definitely odd. On one occasion, I was with my son, who was a very little boy at the time, and it was a crystal clear blue sky in my neighborhood. Now, I happen to live near an airport. I see aircraft every day. And in this particular instance, I saw an intensely bright light against a blue sky. It was the brightest daytime object I've ever seen in my life, other than the sun itself. So I was struck by how reflective this object was, and I just stood and watched it, just like this. And I couldn't make out a shape. I couldn't make out what this object was, and I was very curious. Meanwhile, my poor little son, who was 3 years old, started to wonder, what happened to my dad? He's turned into a statue. So I could hear him calling for me, asking what was going on. But I felt like if I took my eyes off this object, I was going to lose it, which was ridiculous, because where could it go? There was nowhere for it to go. But I had this thought, don't stop watching, don't stop watching. But eventually I had to turn to my son, who was going crazy down there, wondering. So this is what I did. I pointed, just like this, so I wouldn't lose the object. I turned to my son for about 1 second. 1 second. I turned back, and that thing was gone. Now, what is that? I looked for the next 5 minutes across the sky trying to find this thing, and it was not there. Was it some intelligence just giving me a little tap on the shoulder? Yeah, maybe. I've thought about it just about every day since it happened. I had another case where I was walking with my family. We had the family dog. It was in the evening, nice night sky, very thin layer of clouds. And this was many years later. It was with my daughter, who was about 8 or 9 years old. And in our house, I'm Mr. UFO, so I talk about it a lot. And I just said jokingly, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we looked up and saw a UFO right now? My daughter and I looked up like this, and sure enough, we saw this object moving at a high rate of speed across the sky. Not as fast as a meteorite, but much faster than an airplane. And the thing about it is that it went into this thin patch of clouds, very thin, and never came out. So if it was a meteorite, and I still hold out that possibility, but if it was, it just so happened to burn out as it hit this very thin patch of cloud, just when we happened to look up. I don't know. I am convinced that there's an interaction, a mental interaction, at least in many of these cases. These things somehow, I feel, can get inside our head. There are many cases in the literature of people saying, I had an urge at 2:30 in the morning to sit up in my bed and look out my window, and I saw this glowing orange ball of light. I've spoken to people this has happened, and I've read many cases similar to this. There are a number of instances where witnesses will say over and over again, I felt like it was reading my thoughts. I really have no reason to doubt that after my own 2 experiences. And it wasn't like I felt someone directing me to do something, but it was very odd.
Do you feel that this was ET or man-made?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Well, my feeling is, and I could be wrong, is that if it's got the ability to get into my head, I suspect it may not be ours. But that could be a limitation of my own thinking on it. I've talked about a breakaway civilization enough times. Would they have the ability themselves to penetrate human consciousness? And sure, the answer is they might. One source that I spoke to, that I have reason to think knows something about this, just said to me basically that in certain of their sciences. This classified world is vastly ahead of the rest of us in computing, in nanotech, in AI. So maybe they have this capability. Biotech also. Certainly within what we know of U.S. conventional military capabilities, they've been working on technologies to screw with the human brain for a long time. A lot of the weapons that they used, even back 20 years ago in the first Gulf War, were designed to generate a panic and disorientation in enemy soldiers. I think they were quite successful. That's 20 years ago. So I think they've got some capabilities now. The problem with the UFO phenomenon today, especially, is when you see something that's bizarre, it's really sometimes hard to know what are we dealing with. Are we dealing with the us or them? I think that both of these factors are part of the equation. And I think there's multiple us's, and I think that there are multiple thems. And maybe, just maybe, multiple relationships within that. I think we might really be dealing with a very complex, secret Cold War going on.